Hey everybody, let's talk Portuguese. Today's video is going to be all about Portugal Day and the International Day for the Portuguese language. But before we get into today's video, I have some exciting new things to announce for the channel. I have set up a Discord for the channel where you can chat in English and Portuguese about anything related to Portuguese, linguistics, cultural topics, and anything related to that. The Discord is a place where I'm welcoming people of all language levels, so whether you have questions about something in a language, you'd like to improve your skills in that language, or you would simply like to talk about linguistics or cultural or Portuguese topics, you can feel more than welcome to do so on the Discord. In order to prevent spam on the Discord, because it is public, the only thing that I'm asking for you to do when you join is to introduce yourself to the chat, as well as react to an automated message with your variety of Portuguese, whether that's the one that you already speak, the one you're learning, or simply the one that you have the most interest in. So if that's something that you would be interested in, please do join us on the Discord. I would love to see you there. Also, if you're enjoying the videos that I make on my channel and you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon. Patreon is basically a place where you can buy me a coffee each month, and in return you get access to exclusive things. One of those exclusive things is in fact a channel reserved only for patrons. So if you want to talk to me directly in a patron-only channel, you have access to that upon joining the Patreon. You can also have access to things like knowing about what I'm working on next first, sources and other materials that I gather when I'm doing the research for my videos, and even fun things like postcards sent directly from me to you. So if that sounds interesting to you, head on over to patreon.com/Sashinka, where you can find out all of the details. Now, on with the video. So today's video is going to be all about Portugal Day and the International Day for the Portuguese language. And you might be wondering why I'm lumping these two holidays that are not even celebrated on the same day together, where it appears that they would only be tangentially related. But I'm here to tell you that they are much more than tangentially related. So let's get started with the International Day for the Portuguese language, or o Dia Internacional ou Mundial da Língua Portuguesa. This is a holiday that came about as the result of negotiations within the CPLP, or Comunidade de Países de Língua Portuguesa, which is an international organization that represents Portuguese-speaking countries. In 2009, the CPLP settled on May 5th as the day that should be celebrated as the International Day for the Portuguese language. The first edition of the celebrations for this holiday were supposed to be this year in 2020. That being said, May 5th of 2020, as we all know right now, was in the middle of the global pandemic, so celebrations were fairly minimal. Book fairs and conferences and other sorts of celebrations that could be held were either postponed or simply did not happen this year. But here's to hoping that it's the first of many years of celebrations of the Portuguese language to come. Now, May 5th was a while ago, but something that was much more recent is Portugal Day, or the Day of Portugal. In Portuguese, obviously, that is o Dia de Portugal, and more formally, it is also known as the Day of Portugal, Camões, and the Portuguese communities, or o Dia de Portugal, de Camões e das Comunidades Portuguesas. This is basically Portugal's national day, a public holiday in Portugal that celebrates the nation itself. Now, you might be asking yourself how that relates to the Portuguese language specifically, and for that we need to look at the very middle of that name, which is, of course, the inclusion of Camões. Luís de Camões has always been at the center of this national holiday. The first celebration of this holiday was in 1880 on the 300-year anniversary of the death of Camões. It was at that time known as the Festa Nacional de Grande Gala. And in the 140 years since then, a lot of things have happened in the world, and this holiday has gone through a number of permutations going along with the political regimes in the country at any given time. That being said, nowadays, 440 years after the death of Camões, we continue to celebrate the Portuguese national holiday on the anniversary of his death. You might be wondering why this holiday is held on the anniversary of his death and not his birth, as is usually the case with public figures. The simple reason for that is that we're not entirely sure when exactly Camões was born, we just have a general idea of which year it was. His death, on the other hand, has a pretty widely agreed upon date, and so we use that as the point of reference when marking the life of Luís de Camões. Although there are plenty of other national symbols in Portugal, and there are plenty of important kings, including the kings that founded the country itself, the selection of Camus is especially symbolic because of his importance in the development of the Portuguese language. Camus is most well known, of course, for his epic poem Os Lusíadas, which celebrates the golden age of the Portuguese discoveries. Camus was not just a writer, he also served in the Portuguese military and was something of an adventurer, so he lived in many far-flung places across the globe. He went blind in one eye in a battle in North Africa, and he was stationed all across Asia at various points in his lifetime. The manuscript of Os Lusíadas was also almost lost to history. Camus was in a shipwreck off the Mekong River Delta. Legend has it that he swam to shore with one arm while holding the manuscript above water with the other one. Obviously, this is not an account that we can verify the details of, but the fact remains that Camus did survive a shipwreck with Os Lusíadas in tow, and he made his way all the way back to Portugal and got it published. Now, Os Lusíadas was not the only work that Camus produced. He was a very prolific writer, and he has quite a lot of other poetry as well. His work, Os Lusíadas, is considered one of the all-time greats among the classics, and it is of a similar importance to the Portuguese language as Don Quixote was to the Spanish language. The role that Camus had in Portuguese literature is not to be understated. He is just as important to the Portuguese language as Miguel de Cervantes was for the Spanish language, Alexander Pushkin was for the Russian language, or even Goethe was for the German language. Modern Portuguese itself is often marked as beginning upon the publication of Os Lusíadas. And around the same time that Luís Camões was alive and writing his poetry, the first grammars of modern Western languages were being published. These grammars would rely on an institutional structure being created in order to guide the formalization of these languages, or they would look to the most prestigious writers for best practice. In the case of Portuguese, which didn't get a national academy for the language until the 1800s, Camus was the gold standard of the language. Indeed, the usages by Camus of the Portuguese language were some of the greatest sources of reference for the early grammars of the Portuguese language. A lot of things in Portuguese have changed since the time of Camus, but it is undeniable that Camus has had an outsized impact on Portuguese literature. And the importance of literature to a language is also something that is not to be understated. Literature is one of the main vehicles that shape languages. In the West, the existence of a literary tradition is one of the factors that would go on to influence which languages would be selected as national languages. Indeed, in some Western countries, the difference between a regional language being considered a language in its own right, or simply being a deformed dialect of the national language, is the existence of a literary tradition in that language. Best practices and grammatical conventions in writing inform the standardization of any given language, and that is then passed on to speech. Speech and writing do not exist in a vacuum separate from one another. So I have to reiterate that the impact of literature on language is not to be understated. And written traces of language are some of the most important materials that we have that let us know about ancient languages and how they worked. So to go back to Camus and his role as the national figure of the national holiday of Portugal, it is fair to say that the Portuguese national identity is intimately tied to the Portuguese language. Obviously, on this channel, we celebrate the Portuguese language in all of its forms across the globe. And you may have noticed that the formal name of this holiday includes as Comunidades Portuguesas, or the Portuguese communities abroad. This is because there is a large Portuguese diaspora all over the world. These are people from Portugal and their descendants who have made their way to countries like France, Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, South Africa, Venezuela, and many other countries. There are significant numbers of Portuguese people in those countries, but there are lots of Portuguese people living in all corners of the world, from the Caribbean to further flung corners of Asia. So Portugal Day is also a holiday that celebrates those communities abroad, and in recent years it has been celebrated not only in Portugal, but also in other countries that have a large Portuguese diaspora. The creation of the International Day for the Portuguese language is also a nod to the importance of Portuguese across the planet. Simply put, these are two of the most important holidays that celebrate the Portuguese language across the globe. So a belated happy International Day for the Portuguese language and Portugal Day from me to you. That's all I got for this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you learned something or otherwise found it interesting, give me a thumbs up down below. You might think about subscribing to my channel if you're not already, I make lots of videos about the Portuguese language, which you can find in playlists directly on my channel or in the eye above, and I will see you next time.